Who's going to speak? James is going to speak. I've got you down to speak.
Okay, thank you, Jack. So I'll take the paper as read. The purpose of the paper is to provide an update on the now agreed proposals for a merger of the 6 South West London CCGs, that is Kingston, Richmond, Merton, Wandsworth, Sutton and Croydon. The CCGs have now agreed to merge from the 1st of April 2020. That is a decision that is supported by our governing bodies, our memberships who are GP practices in the local areas, and it's also supported by NHS England. The paper contains a summary at the top of page 6 of your pack of what will change under a merged CCG and what will stay the same. I think it's important to emphasise that many of our structures and processes will remain very similar to currently. We will have, although there will be a single CCG governing body for South West London, there will be a CCG, there'll be a Merton Borough Committee with a delegated budget for health services in Merton, and that Borough Committee will, wherever practicable, look to make its decisions along with partners through the structure that we've created, which is called Merton Health and Care Together, which is a board that involves the CCG, the council, and also other local health and care organisations. So that's probably a very quick summary of where we are. There's a little bit more detail in the paper, including some of the financial and statutory implications, but I would probably just, in the interest of time, stop there and move to questions.
Thank you, James. Are there any questions? Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. I know that you mentioned that the NHS allocation that relates to the current Merton CCG area will be fully delegated to Merton Borough Committee. So the allocation that's designated for 2021, that will be fully delegated to Merton. And a couple of other questions. Where will the Merton team be based? Will there be sort of a super CCG area? And also, has the committee been defined already, so do you already know who's going to be sitting on that?
Yes, sure. So the team will be based in Wimbledon. We have a shared management team across Merton and Wandsworth CCGs already. The way that the restructure is effectively working is that the primary care and transformation functions will remain with that local team. And the efficiency that we're creating comes out of sharing our finance, corporate governance, quality, basically our transactional back office functions. So we're achieving a 20% management cost reduction, which is reinvested in services from saving those functions. So all of the current team that works with partners such as the council on local borough-based services is based in Wimbledon. It's already shared with Merton and Wandsworth, and it will continue to work in that way, and is very similar in structure to the team that we have at the moment. The second question was about the... Sorry.
Whether, I suppose, is the team going to be the same, so the borough-based committee team will be the same, is it?
Yeah. So we have defined within the draft constitution that's been through the membership of the Borough Committee. The Borough Committee will be chaired by a local GP, who will be the Borough Committee chair. It will have a majority on it of clinical members of the local community, so basically clinical GPs from the local area will be the majority of the Borough Committee. So the decision making around borough-based services will still be led by local Merton GPs, but wherever possible, that committee will make its decisions through a committee in common structure with other partners through Merton Health and Care Together. So this is really about saying wherever possible we will make partnership-based decisions rather than make individual decisions as a borough committee.
Carl.
Thanks, Peter. So I've got a background in the public sector, and every document that I've ever seen like this always talks about efficiency savings and efficiencies, and if every single one of those had delivered what it said it was going to do, we'd be the most efficient country in the world at the moment. So my question really is, you talk about efficiencies, what do you see within those? what are the risks to the service potentially? Where are there areas that you've identified that actually you may not be able to make savings? And what are the risks in terms of delays to the sort of timeline?
So it's important to say that the efficiencies that we're making relate solely to our management cost budget. So within CCGs we hold the two budgets, so for the management and for the commissioning very separately. The 20% efficiencies do not affect the commissioning budget, they only affect the management budget. It's a national requirement that all CCGs save 20%. That is part of the NHS's contribution to the long-term plan that came out earlier in the year. So we are making that 20% on management. Now, the way that we have identified is best to do that is to go through this merger process. It's one of the key drivers of the merger process because it allows us to make savings on basically the cost of running 6 organisations reduces dramatically when we're only running one organisation. And that allows us to make the 20% management cost reduction but preserve those local teams that do all that transformation work and all that partnership work, which has been so strong, particularly in Merton over the last couple of years. So in terms of a risk, I actually would foresee a greater risk of not doing this because if we didn't do the merger, we would still have to find 20%. The 20% is mandatory on all the CCGs. That management cost budget is being reduced from April 2020, but we would have to take that out of our team without doing the merger, and that would mean really looking at all of those functions rather than being able to look at the consolidation across those back office functions, which is what we are planning to do.
I totally appreciate that and I understand the sort of the context. So just for my just a sort of clarity and to be sure, you don't foresee within the savings that you've identified that there are any that are going to be difficult or may take longer than sort of foreseen within the plan?
No, we have a at the moment draft, but whilst to draft a fully costed structure for the new CCG from the 1st of April 2020 that we have engaged staff on, that delivers the 20%. There will be some changes to that between now and the 1st of April because we are now going through the process of formal staff consultation and everything that goes with that, and undoubtedly things will emerge from it. But in terms of the proof of concept, can we deliver the 20% by doing those things? Yes, we have absolutely proved that we can do it. So that there isn't a particular risk relating to that process.
Thank you. A very brief first question, and I'd like to come back. I'm sure I haven't missed it in the report. Can you list the 6 CCGs that are merging?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. They are Kingston, Richmond, Merton, Wandsworth, Sutton and Croydon.
Okay, thank you for that. It probably should have been in the report. I note on 3.6 there's a mention of relationships with St George's Hospital in terms of secondary care within the new merged CCG, but obviously within that CCG there's Kingston Hospital, St Helier Hospital and Croydon Hospital as well. What implications will there be for the communications and joint working between the new larger CCG and those 4 acute hospitals within the, if there are only 4, I don't know if there was another one, but I think those are the 4 acute hospitals within the new CCG area. Apart from the one paragraph there on St George's, what plans are there for working with the other hospitals in the new area?
So, as well as the structures that we have in place, that we're putting in place around working with St George's, other local place-based teams within the new CCG, within the current CCGs, are also building their partnership structures with those local, with those acute trusts, and then we work with our colleagues in those other areas to make sure that we have sort of fully joined up plans around each of the local hospitals. So there is a partnership structure in Croydon, there is a partnership structure in Kingston and Richmond around Kingston Hospital, and there is a partnership structure in relation to St Helier as well. So that work has been ongoing for a couple of years, so all the work that we've done to build stronger partnerships in Merton and Wandsworth, there have been parallel pieces of work in each local area, and this is effectively strengthening the join that we already have between those different parts of the partnership plan.
Yeah, let me just come in perhaps to explain why you've only got reference to St George's. It's because each of our local NHS trusts, for them we have a host commissioner, CCG. So Wandsworth is the host commissioner for the St George's contract, Sutton CCG is the host commissioner for St Helier, Croydon for Croydon, Kingston for Kingston Hospital. So because Merton and Wandsworth are working together, across Merton and Wandsworth we jointly now commission services from St George's. It's just to do with the historical hosting arrangements. That's why there's specific reference just to St George's, because that affects the way we work in Merton.
So I can very briefly come back on that. People in across Merton, people just in Colliers Wood that I represent, when needing treatment, many go to St George's, certainly for Colliers Wood. Many people across Merton go to certainly Croydon, certainly St Helier, certainly St George's, and to an extent, for certain things, will go to Kingston as well. So it is, I mean, I'm pleased to hear that this may and hopefully will lead to better working together, but we need to recognise that St George's doesn't just serve Wandsworth and Croydon doesn't just serve Croydon. People, certainly in Merton being the centre of this sort of the wider area, people from Merton go to all four of those hospitals and smaller health centres around. As long as, I think I'm happy that the procedures are in place to take account of that, but I just wanted to make absolutely sure of that.
I mean, absolutely. So we have within that lead commissioning process, we run a very detailed planning round where we make sure that where we are doing work that relates to a specific area, that is then reflected in the plans for each of those local hospitals. So we have a number of pieces of service transformation work that we do around the hospitals because it makes sense to do them around the hospitals. And then we have a number of pieces of service transformation work that we do around borough as place because we accept that many services are based in the borough. So then what we do is through the planning round make sure that the plans of both hospitals and borough as place are reflected in each of the plans and that we've got alignment. I absolutely think that having a single South West London CCG will strengthen those links. What it means in very practical terms is that there's one finance team and one performance team and one planning team actually looking at what is going on in those 6 places and those four hospitals. So it allows us to coordinate a lot of that work in the back office to make sure that everything is joined up as you rightly say that it should be.
Any more questions? Okay, well, I've got one for the couple actually, I follow on from Carl. So my first is, how many reorganisations have there been since 2010?
I guess it depends what you mean. I guess it depends what you mean by reorganisation, but we had the Health and Social Care Act, which obviously created CCGs.
So what did we have before CCGs?
PCTs.
Yeah. So that's one. And then
When did that come in?
That was 2013, I guess.
Yeah. That's the only major reorganisation. This is now about reshaping the structures we currently have. So we're not getting rid of CCGs. This is about merging existing CCGs.
But weren't people at the time making the point that you needed to operate across a wider area in order to get the benefits of economies of scope?
So I think it's important to say that I've been working with Merton and Wandsworth now since May 2017, and throughout that time we have sought to work on a coordinated basis across South West London, wherever it has been practicable to do it. There are many things that we already plan across South West London, so when we are looking at commissioning policies for new treatments, for example. We do that on a South West London basis because we're very keen to ensure that there's a level of consistency. There are a number of other service innovations that require us to work at scale. So if it involves say mental health services that need to operate at scale, we already do that on a South West London basis. So the geography of the current CCGs has not stopped us from planning services at scale where it's been the right thing to do. This merger of the South West London CCGs allows us to achieve a 20% management cost reduction in an effective way that doesn't affect local planning, but it will also make some of that joint work that has already been going on for a couple of years, and we've already got a number of shared teams. It will make it easier.
So those reorganisations cost money, don't they? When we reorganise.
We hope that
People lost their jobs and people been made redundant.
So we hope that there's change, and we don't consider it a major reorganisation because it's just a continued change in the way we're working. Obviously, as James has articulated, the plan is that this will save money. It's going to save 20% of our running costs. The purpose being not to take money out of the NHS, but it allows that to be reinvested in frontline services.
But it will involve redundancy, and did the previous one involve redundancy?
So I can't talk to the specifics of the last reorganisation because I wasn't an officer of the system at that time. In terms of this one, we can't rule out redundancies, but equally we have been planning this for some time, and we have, understandably, you will know that we run at typically a level of vacancies, and we are planning our workforce quite carefully to minimise the impact on our workforce, to look to redeploy people wherever possible, and to basically, there are ways that you can run the HR process so that you try and minimise the impact on staff. And we've been doing all of those things for some time.
Are there people that have been made redundant and then rehired under these different changes? I'm not talking about specifically in Merton, but in the system generally.
I'm sure historically there have been.
Yeah, I wouldn't be in a position to comment on any specifics.
Okay. And then coming back to Carl's question, how do we know whether these savings will be achieved? In what way will you present that information to the local community? Will we actually see what you were spending beforehand and what you're spending afterwards? So we'll be able to see this 20% saving.
Sure. So the allocations for each CCG for next year, when the detailed allocations are published, the 5-year allocation has already been published. We'll get then the detailed 1-year allocation in December, and what you will see is there's a commissioning programme allocation and there's a running cost allocation. That running cost allocation will come down by 20%. So when we publish the final Merton CCG annual report in the spring of next year, you will see that year on year our running costs will be coming down on that basis.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for that. Now, we do have the next item. Item 5 is the Clinical Commissioning Group 5-year strategy. Some of you will have noticed that was not included in the pack, and there is a bit of a story to this, and that was that some time ago James offered to brief me on this particular strategy, and on a sort of chair-to-chair, officer-to-chair basis. And my response to that was that I would prefer that such matters were discussed here in the Scrutiny panel rather than me going off for a meeting. So that's what we agreed, although I think there's a sense in which our colleagues in health don't feel that this is something that is necessary to go before health scrutiny. So the strategy paper arrived on Monday, and of course our papers were dispatched on Thursday. Now, the difficulty with this, and I'm trying to be sort of completely fair to people, is that we cannot, I don't think we can have an adequate discussion about something that we haven't seen. There has been a discussion about whether it could have been circulated to members, but not to members of the public. And we have a rule that if papers are being circulated with the agenda dispatched, then members of the public are entitled to see that. So that's where we are. And on that basis, when I kind of talked about this, I took the view that we shouldn't discuss this matter tonight and that we should have an update at the next meeting. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Well, in that case, could I thank you? I hope you feel your time hasn't been wasted. Certainly we've had the opportunity to ask you questions about the first thing, and we'll talk to you again about this in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6 is the business plan update, and Caroline couldn't be with us this evening, but Roger is here in her place, and I'm sure he will introduce the paper and answer any questions that members may have. Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you've got a very detailed and extensive business plan paper in front of you, so I don't propose to go through that in great detail. I'm sure you've all read it. All I'd like to do is really just set a little bit of context and provide a few points, but then I'd be happy to take questions, or the officers would be happy to take questions. I think it's fair to say in summary that we're in a period of extreme uncertainty, and there's still an awful lot we don't know in terms of the authority's finances for next year or even the medium term. There was a spending round in September, and it effectively just confirmed the figures would be the same for departments for 2021. So that means that in your specific area, adult social care grants will continue to 2021, but there is no certainty as to their future delivery in years beyond that. And as you know, what we're trying to do is as a medium-term financial strategy, but really all we've got is confirmation of figures for next year. Within that statement, the government also confirmed that councils could levy up to 2% precept for adult social care, which is a continuation of a concept that they ran before, as well as the usual sort of 2% council tax increase up to. But only the council tax increase at this stage is the 2% council tax increase is included in these numbers that you see before you. The 2% precept for adult social care is yet to be determined. So this report contains the first series of savings proposed, with further savings and indeed pressures currently being developed, which you will get the opportunity to scrutinise at a later date. You will note at paragraph 5.1 that the residual budget gap after updating the medium-term financial strategy and taking account of the savings that have been put forward, the details of which you will have tonight, is some 2.8 million for 2020-21, rising to some 16.2 million in 23-24. So there is still a gap in the budget, and there's still a fair amount of uncertainty, as I've already said. Further savings are being developed, and indeed pressures are articulated. So the report contains details of the proposed savings together with their equality studies, and really the only guarantee I can make to you tonight is that these numbers will undoubtedly change as we go forward with further information. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. And the other certainty is that in the long run we're all dead. I think it was Keynes that said that, wasn't it? Are there any questions? We will ask questions on the opening statement, and then we can go through the individual savings. But are there any questions about the sort of the general environment that we find ourselves in?
Yeah, in general, I mean, I know we have to make the decisions on the information we have, but it seems like with the fact that the government, I think, were due to present a budget a few weeks ago and then pulled it and suspended Parliament because we're now going to have a general election, so we don't know who's going to be in government by the end of this year, and we don't know what decisions they're going to make. I don't know what the allocation has already been made in terms of the 20 to 21 financial year, but those could obviously change, and almost certainly will change. And as you say, we are pretty much flying blind, which I think makes it very difficult at this stage for this committee to start looking in any detail at the savings we need to make and the budget we're likely to have, because certainly for the next month or two, for the rest of this calendar year, we have no idea. I think we've probably got no idea, not even a ballpark figure of what we're going to have to spend next year in terms of our allocation from government. It's astonishing that somehow the government is supposed to run like this when to set our budget to start next April, we may not even know what it is until 2 months before we've got to set our budget. It's astonishing in itself. But I just think it's going to be very difficult for any of us to make any kind of advisory recommendations or decisions when we just don't know how much money or how little money there's going to be to spend. We're just completely flying blind as far as I can see.
I absolutely agree. The only thing we can do is work on the basis of the numbers being the same for next year as they pretty much are for this year, given that's really all we've been told. And certainly in terms of government departments, they've had their budgets confirmed as the same for next year as they are for this year. So I think the best position we can take on this is to assume some kind of stability in that, so whichever government or whichever administration takes over following the election won't have an awful lot of time to change things. So I suspect our best guess is that they will just adopt the figures as they were previously, as they inherited, but that's our best guess.
So you're suggesting that there will be a policy of carry on keeping calm?
Something like that.
Hannah, would you like to talk about these specific proposals in relation to adult social care?
So I think what would be helpful if I could just go back, because I think we should just take a step back to previously agreed savings from 2020 right through to 22, 23 and beyond. What I hope you have noticed with this set of papers, and yes, there's some question marks around what is the final gap and what the final settlement will be. I think through the careful budget process of community and housing, we're in a position this year where we're not replacing or deferring or trying to change things. So what I'm saying to you is you still have the assurance as a committee that for certainly 2021, the previously agreed savings are on track to be delivered, and plans are in place and work is in place to deliver those. So we don't intend. So in this pack, you will not see replacements or deferred. What you will see in your pack is one thing that was requested that we looked again at because of some of the challenges around potential gaps going forward. Was there any particular savings for community and housing we think we could bring forward from years 22, 23 back to 2021? We've looked at that very carefully, and what I would say to colleagues, that work is ongoing. But in your pack tonight, what you will have, if I can take you to page 73, I think, in your pack. The only thing new in here for you tonight that you will see is a further reduction in public health that we will try to bring forward to 21-22. So work is ongoing. We're looking very closely across the department what else we could deliver by 2021, keeping in mind that our saving target for 2020-21 was 1.9. So that's still, and that we will bring back to the next round of scrutiny to you.
Okay. Any questions? Can't.
You almost read my mind in terms of what my question was going to be. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit, because as we've discussed already, this is an area that's been under a lot of pressure for some time. There were a fair number of savings being done from when this last came. You said those are on track. From that experience, what have been the most difficult savings to make? What's been hard to do, and what do you think from these savings here are likely to be the most hard to deliver going forward?
So I think so looking through from 2020 to 22 and 23, I think the hard work is still to come, because some of our bigger savings hits us in that period of 21, 22 and going forward. In terms of what we've delivered so far and what we're on track to deliver, I think is down to the frontline teams in terms of how they manage the practice and how they work with service users across the place. We've seen, you'll see from the papers, the published papers on the monthly reporting on the community and housing budget, we've turned this tanker around, and it's taken us over 2 years to do that. And you will see that in terms especially around adult social care. We have adopted a model in social care over the last 2 years, which is about strength-based practice and assessments, which is working with people around their strengths and resilience rather than doing things to people, because we have clear evidence base that just handing out large packages of care doesn't actually always get the outcomes for people that they want. So this is more about working with people in relation to what outcomes they want from care. I think what has helped us certainly what's been fundamental to this is our partnership working. We have worked incredibly hard with partners over the last 2 years, that's from health right across the voluntary sector. We've an amazing voluntary sector that is working incredibly hard with us. I think we've been very sensible in the handouts that we've been given in how we've managed that money. So, for example, we chose to invest in our lunch clubs and some additional money over the winter because we believe that's what people are telling us they like to do, rather than just traditional daycare. They like to go to their lunch clubs. So it's really understanding the community we serve, and that's ongoing. We've been at it for 2 years, especially across social care. But it's work that we will continue. We've got we have a large work programme ahead of us to work better. We've got some very traditional type services, so we need to work with we'll talk later about the SIND and some of that task force. But actually, our services for the future need to meet the new demand coming through, and we need to understand that demand a little bit better. So, to sum up, Carl, I would say something around how we work with individuals and their carers, how we work with the voluntary sector and health. We've undertaken a big piece of work around commissioning, so how we work with the market. So we were tied into very block contracts. So some of that has been negotiating with our providers, and John Morgan, my AD, and his team have worked really hard to build that commissioning capacity, that we actually are influencing the market rather than the market dictating the price to us. We're also very keen to bring people home, so we've been looking at all our out-of-area placements to understand why we're sending people so far away from Merton. It's been born and raised here, and trying to do some work around that. You can't take your eye off the ball. It's hard just to pick one thing that's hard. Housing has been quite a challenge to us as well, but again, we've done a lot of work with the LGA around securing some grant funding around homelessness and reduction. That's really helped us. Our Director of Public Health does an amazing job with a grant that gets continuously cut, and we've had to think very creatively and across community housing how we work the public health grant with health and social care, so we try and join some of this stuff up. So probably some of the key headlines.
Actually, that gives me an opportunity to invite Dagmar if you would like to kind of say anything about this at this stage. And in particular, my question is, do we have any idea how much public health has been cut since 2011?
Yeah, so we definitely have a very clear, you can understand. We have a very clear understanding around the consecutive cuts. It's over 10%. And because in all fairness, you have to look at what was the peak funding in public health and where are we now. There are a few shenanigans because the public health grant started out not including health visitors and school nurses, and so some of the figures you see will vary a bit. But the gist of the matter is that everybody talks prevention, but the main grant that is meant to cover prevention gets cut. So that shows you that we're in a bit of a pickle, really, and you can't dress it up. So as Hannah said, we have to be super crafty, and the best way for us was really to sweat partnerships. And you will see in my item around the sexual health strategy, that's precisely what we're trying to do, because the system is awfully fragmented. So we all have our little silos, and if we put all what we've got and what we want to achieve on the table, there is still a little bit of room of manoeuvre. But to be fair, it's getting really skinny. And so we all as well root around additional money. So if there are any bits going, we're always there trying to leverage money in. Again, you're stronger when you do that on a bigger footprint. So reflecting back on some of the stuff we had with the health colleagues, they are obviously more flush than us. They're more trendy than us. Well, they get the limelight. So we have to, whether we like it or not, really work with them. And particularly me with my public health services, a number of when prevention goes belly up, it queues up in A&E. So they feel the pain. So they have some sympathy with public health. And so obviously we work together to try to make the system work as well as possible for our residents.
Thank you. Any questions? So is there anything else that you need to? Well, in that case, thank you for that, Roger. So item 7 is the Merton Joint Sexual Health Strategy, page 272. So we've got.
Shall I just continue then? Sorry, I am standing in for Julia. Well, it's my strategy.
Julia's name on it.
I am really sorry.
Julia down, and I'm thinking which one is Julia?
Oh, sorry. I'm doubling up here.
Well,
Being efficient in the time.
Yes. So, as we've already alluded to, you've in front of you our draft sexual health strategy. Really for you to give a pre-decision scrutiny. The plan is, strategy has already gone through a lot of stakeholder engagement and will go to be approved by the Health and Wellbeing Board in January. So we wanted to open it up to your comments as well. And as I've introduced in the previous item, the purpose for us to have a strategy, and there wasn't one in Merton before, is really to help with squaring the conundrum that sexual health needs are going up and the grant is going down. Because the system is very, very fragmented, and you see in the document just some examples, I have a statutory duty to commission sexual health services, meaning services for diagnosing and treating sexually transmitted diseases as well as contraception. But the CCG commissions abortion services, NHS England commissions HIV prevention services because they're very expensive, and so on. So you can see what really should all hang together is all really fragmented. And so the purpose, therefore, of having a joint sexual health strategy with our NHS colleagues is precisely what I said before. Let's just look what we've got jointly and then see, can we improve the sort of connectedness and efficiency of services. And I think what probably stands out around the strategy is to work very closely with our frontline staff as well as with the communities that we serve, and particular groups that sometimes get overlooked. So people understand that sexual health services are particularly relevant for young people, but guess what? there is sex happening in the older age, and we sometimes forget that. So are our services actually catering? And so very broad engagement, and also engagement with services that are aligned. So substance misuse services are really, really important, that they understand some of the overlap of the risk-taking. So I won't go into all the details. I think it's a straightforward strategy in a way. No big surprises. People, first of all, need information. There's loads of stuff out there, but filtering out what is really credible is the trick, and get it to the right people at the right time. Then access to services, and then a much broader understanding about sexual health and well-being, and the opposite around working against stigma, but also the really nasty side of maltreatment, exploitation, is the sort of third priority. And I think I'll leave it at that and open up for questions.
Are there any questions, Rebecca?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm whether the strategy precipitates any pooling of budgets, or if that already takes place.
No, so there's no formal pooling of budgets. At the moment, it is a framework of aligning our work. The way we're commissioning our sexual health services at the moment is that we're working under a pan-London programme. And one of the reasons is that we are mandated to offer sexual health provision 24/7 for everybody, anywhere, and we just have the bill. And so what we've said in London is we have to get a agreed tariff and uniform service spec across London, because otherwise the providers will play us out against each other. And we actually sweated the budget quite a bit, to the chagrin of the providers, but we managed. So at the moment it's alignment, but working under the sort of umbrella of the Pan-London programme, which helps us a lot, because they have worked a lot with clinicians so that the pathways and the tariffs we work to have sort of clinical credibility, so that it's not just managers saying we want the cheapest, it is clinicians saying what is good practice, and then working with clients. And one of the innovations we have brought in, and I'm actually really quite proud of, is the e-service. So it's probably one of the very few clinical services where you can get online, you type in your symptoms, you get a kit sent to you in the post, you can do your swabs and you send it back. And that is a big step forward, both for the clients but also for the person, because it is particularly suitable for people who are asymptomatic but worried, and therefore come to a clinic. So that gives you a little bit of a flair. Whether in the future there are opportunities for pooling, we do it very much, rather than in principle, on a case-to-case basis.
Actually, congratulate Thomas on his promotion to Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. The reductions in teenage conceptions, can you go into more detail? Sort of, can you put that down to anything in particular? Is that a sort of particular success of one piece of work or another, or is it just a general?
Of course, I would say it's public health success. How can you ask that question? I think the great and the good have been pouring over that, and we have to admit, it is multifactorial, because there are societal changes that have helped. But it is probably fair to say, and that's what some of the evaluations and the evidence showed, is that a coherent effort on a specific issue by lots of partners does bear fruit when you stick to it, when you not just get bored after 6 months and move on. So there is some learning in it.
Thank you. 2.1 3 and 4 in the report mentions the specific groups that are most at risk and that we most want to target. For instance, men who have sex with men, under 25s, black and minority ethnic, and in 2.14, people with learning difficulties, mental health issues and substance misuse issues. And also mentions women within that. I'm interested in the sort of cross-cutting and intersectionality within that, so that are black and minority ethnic men who sleep with men who are under 25 triply at risk because they fall to those 3 groups? Are women who have substance abuse issues, and women are more than 50% of the people in the boat, we're not targeting all women. So how much is that intersectionality and cross-cutting affecting how you target your work?
Yeah, so it's a little bit clunkily phrased, so well spotted. Yes, of course, there is some overlap and clustering, particularly MSM and substance misuse, chemsex, and you find other particular clusters and overlaps. I think what is the important bit around it is that we've listened quite widely to groups that normally don't come forward, and then that are not necessarily perceived as mainstream, and hence feel they haven't got a voice, and hence feel that the service, that they haven't got a say in how the service is shaped. And for me, the MSM community is actually really quite vocal and have some really good lobbying. But people with learning disability, people with dementia, those ones, people don't talk about their sexuality. And destigmatizing that, I think, is a real step forward. And I'm looking to our other work around people with learning disability, and it is part and parcel of what we want to achieve.
Can I come back briefly? Very briefly, obviously, all those different groups that I mentioned at first and you've talked about, in nowhere that I've seen does it mention social, economic and deprivation, and surely that's a factor as well.
Yeah, so it's always a factor. It is a generic factor around accessing healthcare and presenting earlier or late. That's the sort of often the factors that we particularly see. So in the way we are locating our services, we have made very clear that we've got a specialist clinic in Clapham Junction, because people feel they want to have the clinic where there is very good transport nodes. And then we've got the spokes, that's our hub, and then we've got the spokes, one in Wimbledon and one in Mitcham, precisely to ensure that it's not just the usual, but it is harder to have the Wideway spoke to work than the Wimbledon one. And so it's not a done deal. We've also commissioned a particular service to do some outreach, particularly for our younger people.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Zachman. I was just wondering, do you have any school programs? Do you sort of go into schools and, do on the prevention side of things?
Yeah, very, very important. You will have seen that there will be a statutory requirement for sexual health education to be part of the PSHE from September 2020, and so we're working very closely with our colleagues and CSF in schools to help prepare for that.
Thank you, Chair. Never mind. In section 225, the estimation of 28,000 people in Morden. Is that the real figure? There are more under this somewhere, and they are hidden away from us?
So, it's important to understand what the figure counts. It is attendances at clinics. So it is not people, it is attendances. So some of those people will go several times. But I think it's a really stark example of the scale. Yeah, absolutely. And so overall, because the figures were a little bit hard to digest from October to June, so I've asked my commissioner just before the meeting, give me something that can stick in people's minds. So 30,000 attendances altogether, and 1/3 is for contraception and 2/3 is for STIs, sexually transmitted diseases. It's happening out there.
Okay. It's spreading, I hope. Not. It's amazing.
Of the 30,000, you talk about multiple visits. Do you have a number for?
I haven't got it up my sleeve. We can dig it out. I haven't got it now with me. But the fact of the matter is, it is a very high volume service. And therefore, if you think about it, the idea of the e-service actually makes a lot of sense. Because for me, the diagnosis, and we have got a really detailed needs assessment behind that, is out of those 30,000, how many have symptoms? Because, after every weekend, there's a peak, guess what, And what happened over the weekend, and the worried people rush to the sexual health clinic to have the tests done. Well, those ones are not all positive, thank God, but they need the testing. That can be done by an e-service very easily. So at the moment, we are just doing what we call this channel shift, and we are only starting to get into it. But for me, that is a big and sensible step forward.
I'm quite interested in this, and I think it's about the repeat visiting. Off the subject a little bit, but I received a talk recently from food banks, and they were saying that somebody might visit a food bank in an emergency and they might visit again 6 months later, but if somebody keeps visiting month after month after month, just before payday every single month, then they flag that as a big problem. So the same when people are attending, if somebody attends once and you never see them again, or they attend once and you see them again 8 months later, but if somebody is coming every weekend or every month, are we flagging that, and are we seeing, sort of frequent flyers to the service and saying there's something underlying? We can't keep testing you, every fortnight. Do we have the capacity to delve down into that and deal with the people who are coming far more often?
Well, where we want to focus, because you're absolutely right, with the volume of stuff you need to absolutely focus, is on particular vulnerable groups. So particularly if it's youngsters, and you start to think, oh my God, what's going on? Is there abuse? Is there exploitation? We're very closely working with our safeguarding colleagues, and that's where the outreach goes as well into schools, so that people have other ways to go. We do a lot of training with our sexual health staff, but there's also quite a fine balance how much you interfere, and if people so choose to spend their weekends, then there is a limit as well of how much interference is welcome. But for vulnerable groups, definitely.
Okay, are there any more questions? Well, in that case, we're asked to review and consider. I think we have. So we can move on.
Excellent.
So 8 is transitioning. This is the task group review. Rebecca, would you like to say anything on this?
I think just reading through the actions that have been taken forward, I just want to say thank you to Carla and the wider team. It just looks like the recommendations have really been translated into very promising, tangible actions. I just want to say thank you.
Isn't that nice? That was worth inviting Rebecca just for that, wasn't it? You can pay me later. Are there any questions on this? Would you like to say anything in respect of what you've been doing, or
Okay, good evening everyone. I'm Carla Gardier. I'm head of the Integrated Learning Disabilities Service, and the Transition Service sits within the Learning Disabilities Services. Myself and Carla, who's sitting next to me to the left, have been working jointly to make some improvements and have certainly pulled up this action plan and setting out the sorts of things that we think are important based on the recommendations that yourself, Councillor Allen, and the task group delivered on the 15th of July. Essentially, we've pulled together a multi-agency process where we've essentially involved children's services as well as the CCG and various other partners to start to review our joint arrangements for young people coming through transitions, and in particular thinking about the young people who wouldn't ordinarily fit into services in the way that we would normally apply our criteria. And as a result of that, the action plan that you see in front of you is as a result of the group that we've put together, the multi-agency group, and we are still working on a number of areas that we've identified. Many of you will be familiar with the recent press around young people coming through transitions who are currently detained in mental health institutions. We've taken on board the recommendations from the groups that's actually reported on this, and we are in the process of identifying how we can build some of that into the work going forward. We've got a date set for January. In fact, we haven't got the date set, but we're in the process of setting a date for all of the agencies to come together, supported by National Team for Development Inclusion, to facilitate and support us to develop and improve the arrangements that we've got locally.
I think just Carla Bennigan, Head of Special Educational Needs and Disabilities. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that I think there's been, since the report was published, I think there's been a real commitment from CCG, adults and children's, and we've moved quite quickly on some quick wins, which I think is really good, and we've had quite a lot of consultation and liaison with Kids First, the parent care reps, and they're actively involved in the development of this plan as well. So I think that's really important to add.
Well, that all sounds very positive.
Yeah, just a brief comment. I'm really obviously pleased with the report and the things coming out of it. Most importantly, I mean, we will have heard horror stories from years ago about the transition being sort of a cliff edge, and somebody turns 18 and just gets thrown from one type of service to another. So it's really encouraging about the process starting before they're 16, the plan completed by the time they're 17, and one of the other pilot projects looking at is even starting at age 14 to start planning towards when the young person turns 18. My interest is actually in the other side. Once they have turned 18 and have up until they're 21, 22, will they still retain contact with those people and services that they accessed before they were 18, and can the transition continue after 18, so that even though you plan for it very well, it isn't still a cut-off, there's still a sort of, like I say, a transition rather than a cut-off at 18. And do people still have access to the services going on through when they're 19, 20, 21, until you sort of more gradually move them into adult social care?
Yes, our intention is to ensure that all young people do have access to services post-18. In fact, the Education Healthcare Plan does actually allow for people to be supported right up to the age of 25 years old. And of course, if a young person has been identified as needing services, we will continue to provide that for as long as they actually need it. And the aim there is to get people to a point where they are independent and are able to kind of manage various aspects of their life. If they're unable to do that, then the support will be provided to them well beyond the age of 25.
Could I also just add to that we're looking at co-locating workers, so they'll have joint children and adult workers, so that it is a smooth transition, and they know those workers pre and post 18, which I think is really positive.
Okay, well, as I was saying, I think it is a positive story. I'd like to thank that task group for their work, and the officers. It's all very well come out with some recommendations, but this looks like it's well on the way. And we thank everyone involved in this process, and the meaningful work that this really helps. So thank you. So item 9 is the work programme. Note that.
Noted.
Noted. Well, in that case, I will thank you for your attendance, for your participation, and you can take the rest of the evening off.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair.
You also make it go.
There is absolutely nothing. Chelsea are playing. That has not influenced the way I chair this meeting in any way, shape or form. I've always been prompt and brief and succinct, and I'm grateful to you all for being so particular tonight. Thank you.